on, Playbook fans? We are back for another episode. Divisional round weekend is upon us. I'm Sweetcar. I got Shovit with me. What's going on, man? How excited are you for these 2 days of football that are upon us?
Dude, I'm so excited. And it's like I'm trying to grasp all of football that I can because I know it's about to end. So it's just so much it's just
I
so
don't
much
think
more
about it.
meaningful now, given that playoffs and then Super Bowl. And then we're done for like months. As far as like a real game goes. So I'm trying to just soak it all in as much as I can right now.
I know, man. Remember when I was bitching about one of the games and I was like, just wait till football's over and I'm gonna wish
Right?
I had this matchup to watch. Like, it's just you live in the moment and in the season you're like, get this away from me. Or, oh my god, I don't want to watch this because this is disgusting. And then
Yeah.
the day after the Super Bowl, you're like, I will literally take Colton Texans right now on the TV. Like, just put it on there, and I will sit there and watch that for 3 hours.
I know. I was thinking about this earlier today too. I was like, "Do you remember when we went to go watch? Like, it wasn't the NFL. It was like during the summer. We went to go watch some other league. I think it's Houston Dino.
Yeah, XFL or UFL. What is it? CFL maybe? Was it
I,
CFL?
I don't know what it was, but it was not the National Football League. And we left in the second half because we were like, "This game sucks. Like, we're not gonna waste our time on this." And so that's what we're like getting, you know, ready for basically, or like that's the only alternative that we have. So soak it all in, man.
I know, man. Maybe there needs to be a competing league that has the same amount of money, the same level of talent, but they just spread it out. So half of this one league plays this season, and then the minute this season's over, you have this other league come in with the same level of talent. I mean, again, that sounds like it's such a pipe dream, but why isn't there a competing conglomerate for the NFL? Like bring
Yeah.
something else on, but they just have, I guess they have to have enough money to where they can pay these players and to want to come over.
But hey, that's what makes the NFL so great, right? Like the fact that the games are only on Sundays, sometimes Thursdays and Mondays.
Yeah,
That's
it's the perfect thing. It's
yeah,
like that's like, the constant tease because it keeps you wanting more because it's not like
absolutely.
we're not giving it to you 7 days a week so you can get sick of it. It's just 3 days a week, and they're slowly expanding with the Thursday nights, and stuff like that. So they're getting there, but they're doing it. They're playing the long game. They're not like, I'm not going to give you 7 days of football right now because then eventually we're going to be like picking and choosing and not watching them some of the games. So all right, that was it. That was so much ranting about all of that nonsense. We have so much shit to talk about right now. Let's jump into it with water cooler talk. I talked about it last episode. This list is just going to get longer and longer and longer. Coaching changes in the NFL. The Vikings finally did it. They fired their defensive coordinator, Ed Donatel. Hallelujah. 3 days too late. I mean, honestly, weeks too late. He should have been fired, at the first sign of this defense just being absolutely abysmal because the writing was on the wall. They are going to be in search for a defensive coordinator now. And the good thing is they were so bad that no matter who they hire, I feel like either they can be the same, which is very hard to do, or get slightly better. So, things are looking up for the Vikings defense. The Baltimore Ravens fire their offensive coordinator, Greg Roman. They were middle of the pack in terms of offense, but they could never quite get receivers going. They're just having trouble
Mhm.
throwing the football. There's questions that, can an offense that's built only for a quarterback like Lamar Jackson succeed in the long run, even for a guy like Lamar? Like, let him use his arm, let him try to expand his game. Don't cater to his game so hard that it diminishes his ability to throw the football and get better from that standpoint. So, that's something that'll be interesting to see when the next offensive coordinator gets there, barring Lamar staying, of course. The Miami Dolphins fired their defensive coordinator, Josh Boyer. Their defense was in shambles. We talked about them all season long. The reason why Tua and their offense was so fun, and, you could start just about anybody in that offense, is because they had to score so much because their defense was so bad. They constantly gave up points, even though they had players on the defense that, even casual NFL fans would be like, that's a good football player, right? Why are their defense struggling so much? Yeah, Xavier Howard, plenty of players. So that's going to be interesting to see. They can turn that ship around real quick because we already know the offense that they have. So heading into next season, I'm sure they're looking to make changes and improvements there. And then finally, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This seemed like the writing was on the wall too. They fire their offensive coordinator, Byron Leftwich. Um, you know, now, it's speculation season with the teams that aren't in the playoffs, right? So was it the fact that, you had the same exact team show of it basically on the field that you did last year or the year before, where the Buccaneers offense was clicking all damn time? They were so good. Even if they lost football games, it was the defense, things like that. Like, you're seeing Brady and Evans connect. And then all of a sudden this year, either, again, speculation game. Did Brady fall off this insane cliff? Did Brady and Evans all of a sudden both fall off this cliff to where they no longer had chemistry? Or was it the fact that Byron Leftwich was now the offensive coordinator and there was something schematically that was entirely the issue?
Dude, that is crazy to think that Byron Leftwich last year was a potential head coach candidate when there were seven different head coach jobs available, and
Yep.
now to get fired, man, it's just such a terrible situation for him. But I think a lot of it, the blame has to be put on Tom Brady, right? I mean, he's getting older. He doesn't have. I mean, his receivers didn't really step up for him when he needed to, and he wasn't firing in all cylinders there either. The run game, Lenny playoff Lenny didn't show up either. So
What a joke. What a joke to wear that playoff Lenny shirt pregame and then play the way he did.
and so there was just a lot of bad things happening for and their offensive lineman issues, right? The Bucks were not a good enough team to like warrant any kind of like playoff success. So for that reason, I feel like it sucks for Byron Leftwich. He just didn't have the personnel, but hopefully he gets an offensive coordinator or some sort of job somewhere else that he can show off his skills. Because I think this guy definitely still has the good game plan, just didn't have the right personnel.
Yeah, and it's one of those situations where he's somebody has to get blamed, right? When you go looking like the way the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense looked like this season, somebody has to take the blame. It can't be a situation where it's like, well, nothing worked out for us. We're going to run the same group back players and coaches and hope for different results. Even if that could be the case, even if they in fact just needed one extra year of chemistry because there was some complexity in there that took a while to learn, you have a short leash when you're getting paid millions of dollars, right? It's a what can you do or what have you done for me now type of league, and that's kind of what it is with all sports. So when somebody has to take the blame because we sat here as speculators being like, why the hell does Tampa Bay look so disgusting when they play offense this year? Byron Leftwich became kind of the
Right.
scapegoat in this situation, right? So we'll see next year with the new offensive coordinator, with Tom Brady another year older, if he comes back, was it in fact Leftwich or was everything just heading in the wrong direction? And again, he became the scapegoat. That's it. Show of it for water cooler talk. Four more coaches, coordinators, whatever, get axed. So again, what that means is off-season speculation season, vacancies are there. And that means we can just sit here and be like, who should get it? Can we talk about this guy and that guy? More content for us randos that just do this for fun. But enough of water cooler talk. Show of it. We have four games we need to talk about. Let's kick it off with the rundown. The first game on Saturday, basically the way these games are lined up, I think they just set it up in terms of what game is going to matter least gets played first, and then the game that they think more people care about, most people care about, gets played last. So the game that they think America cares about least, which I'm super excited about, the Jacksonville Jaguars are traveling Kansas City to take on the Chiefs and Patty Mahomes. Chiefs at home favored by 8.5 points, over under sitting at 53. These two teams did play in the regular season one time back in week 10. Kansas City won that game in Kansas City 27-17. It was an interesting game. And I think, despite the Jacksonville Jaguars being a completely different team from week 10 to now, there are things you can take away from that. Patrick Mahomes had a phenomenal game. He's throwing the football all over this defense, 4 touchdown passes. Even with that, they were able to utilize Pacheco. This was around the time where Pacheco started to really come along. 82 rushing yards this game, and Kelsey did his thing. He had amazing games, consistent games, and then towards the end of the season, you had games where Kelsey kind of had a dud. This wasn't one of them. They struggled covering him, 6 catches, 81 yards, and a touchdown. And even the Jaguars offense actually did really well. I mean, Shishot was talking about towards the latter part of the season how suspect this Chiefs defense was, right? Trevor Lawrence threw for 259, 2 scores, didn't turn the ball over via interception. Christian Kirk had a monstrous day, 9 catches, 105 yards, and 2 touchdowns. But here are the things that kind of matter heading into this matchup from the last matchup. The Chiefs outgained the Jags by 170 total yards. They were 7 of 10 on third down, which means the Jags defense could not get off the field, and the Jags offense was only 4 of 14 on third down. So despite having yards, despite on the drives that they scored, having easily success moving the football, there were drives that ended on via 3 and outs. And again, that's kind of what you can't do against the Chiefs. You have to keep Patrick Mahomes off the field as long as possible. And what's crazy about this game, Shovid, is the Jaguars had no turnovers and the Chiefs had 3 turnovers, and the
Wow.
Chiefs still won the football. It's not every day that you lose a turnover battle by 3 and still end up winning the game. So we talk about, again, you can look into the numbers and you look at that and you're like, how the hell did that happen? But the cadences and the subtleties of the game, where, the Jags had 5 penalties, the Chiefs had none. The Jags had 5 drives in a row that were punts to start the football game, and then they fumbled on their sixth possession, right? So their first 6 possessions were a fumble and 5 punts. And so you started incredibly slow against the team that, out of anybody in the NFL, you probably don't want to start slow against, this Kansas City offense. And so that's going to be what I'm looking for in this matchup. This go around, again, it's a different team. They're playing with some moxie. Trevor Lawrence has had an insane stretch the last half of the season, and so he's building that momentum and carrying it into this matchup. So the Chiefs defense, I already don't think they're that great. The good thing is they play a lot of man-to-man coverage on the outside. So what that means for me is you have the guys that play on the slot. Whether I think it might be they might use Ingram a lot more throughout the middle of the field, because that's, again, he's had a great year, and if they're playing man to man on the outside, you're going to have to beat your defender across the middle. And I look at a lot of Trevor Lawrence dumping the ball off to ETN, and in fact also Trevor Lawrence using his legs. If there's man to man coverage, there's going to be a lot of holes if they're not what's the word I'm looking for, where you're spying. If they're not spying on Lawrence, then all this man to man that's being played on the outside, all it takes is deep routes for the left side or right side to be wide open for Trevor Lawrence. So there is opportunity for this offense to stay in this football game with the Chiefs. I don't think the defense is going to stop the Chiefs enough. I think the Chiefs are going to get at least 24 points on the offensive side, probably more, which means, again, the Jags are going to have to keep up, and the Chiefs defense is not as good as, maybe their record, or maybe the fact that their offense is so good and kind of hides their defense leads kind of the normal eyes to believe. So I think that this is going to be a shootout. I think the Jags are still going to have to play nearly perfect football to beat the Chiefs. And right now, there's really no reason for me to believe that the Chiefs are going to be slowed down. This defense isn't necessarily going to slow them down. So I'm looking at some of those, Mahomes types plays where they go his way. The Jags are going to need a couple of those Mahomes type plays to go against Mahomes, where, he throws a ball, forces it, and it gets tipped and they intercept it or something. A lot of those times they go Mahomes' way, but what they're going to need is they're going to need things to bounce their way, and they're going to have to play a perfect football game. So I still think it's going to be a great matchup. I think the Jags are going to cover the spread. The Chiefs never cover their spread. So it's easy to me that they're getting such a lopsided spread that I think the Jags are going to stick in this football game. But it's going to be a tall, tall order for them to actually come away victorious.
Yeah, I think that even the Jaguars are surprised that they're probably this far. A game that they should have lost against the Chargers. We need to see that second half of the Jaguars. I think you're right. Like they're going to have to put up points on the board to compete with the Chiefs, and that's really the only way that they can stay competitive. Outside of winning the turnover battles and things like that. But even then, 3 turnovers and they still end up with a win. The Chiefs still end up with a win. So that just says a lot how good that offense is. So yeah, it's going to be a tough, tough matchup for the Jaguars. I'm pulling for them. I do want to see the Jaguars get far. Get far. Shishot's got that
Hell
Super
yeah.
Bowl bet that the Jags are going to get to the Super Bowl. I'm rooting for him, and I want to see them get far. But it's just going to be really tough to beat the Chiefs at home.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is, if they somehow pull this away or pull this off, this is going to be, one of those holy shit, like
Yeah.
Trevor Lawrence has come, to the spotlight and shined. It's going to have to be like via the quarterback playing a phenomenal game. Because again, holistically, I just think they don't have enough amazing, true number one weapons. Christian Kirk, they're all great, like solid, amazing twos and good threes, but like in the playoffs, sometimes when you need bailouts, they have Kelsey on the other side. Who's going to be that guy that Trevor Lawrence can, look to bail him out in the playoffs?
Mhm.
That's kind of what's going to be key.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. Should be a fun matchup, even though the NFL doesn't think so. Another fun matchup, a good matchup, NFC East showdown in the playoffs. The New York Giants are going to Philadelphia to face the Eagles. Philadelphia is favored by 7.5 points here. Over under is at 48 points. The first matchup was in Week 14 when the Eagles lost. Sorry, the Giants lost to the Eagles 48-22. Miles Sanders went off, had a monstrous day, 17 carries, 144 yards, 2 touchdowns, and then Jalen Hurts also had 3 total touchdowns, 2 passing and 1 rushing that game. So that was all Philly just demolishing the Giants. The second matchup, that was when the Giants were already in the playoffs. Eagles are fighting for that number one spot in the NFC, and Giants basically benched all their starters, right? Davis Webb gets the start, no Saquon. None of their starting receivers played. Kenny Galladay got a receiving touchdown. So it's just not a good comparison to see how the Giants will be in the playoffs looking at that game and that matchup. And their defense was without tackle Leonard Williams and quarterback Adoree Jackson, who are set to come back. And they didn't play any one of those games against Philadelphia. So that's going to be a good addition to the Giants. And so, in terms of this matchup, I see a spread of 7.5 points, but I also see a team in the Giants that kind of are. Yes, their running game is good, but they're passing the ball really well too. It's kind of been in the last 6 games or so that Daniel Jones has been able to pass the ball efficiently. He hasn't had an interception in I think it was like 1 or 2 interceptions and like 700 throws, some crazy number like that. So he's not having turnovers, and when the Giants don't turn over the ball, they're 7-2 in the season. So that's going to be a key to the victory for the Giants. When I looked at this game, yes, Vegas has him favored by 7.5 points, but I'm like, how can the Giants actually end up winning this game? And it's all gonna boil down to Daniel Jones. He ran the ball often, 17 carries against the Vikings last week, which is a lot of carries. So I think Daniel Jones will have to do that more, or not more, but 17 carries. That speaks volume in itself. When he's outside of the pocket, he's completing passes on 60. He's completing 62% of his passes and has 7 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. So this defensive line that the Eagles have, led by Hassan Reddick, who's a second pro all team, led the NFL or was tied for second in sacks this year, and with Josh Sweat as well. They can beat this Giants offensive lineman, these tackles that they have. So I think Daniel Jones is going to have to start running the ball more, and whether or not that works out for him, historically it has been. So that hopefully works in the favor of the Giants as well. But the Eagles defense, man, that's a tough defense. They've got this guy, CJ Gardner Johnson, tied leader in interception with 6. And the reason why, I'm sure everyone has the Eagles favored is because of that talent gap, right? Eagles
Yep.
have an amazing offense. Jalen Hurts, who I haven't even mentioned yet. You've got AJ Brown, you got Devontae Smith, you got all these guys on offense, and that offensive linemen are just monsters. They can run over the defensive line. So I think that because of their offense being as good as they are, and the Eagles defensive line, that makes this a tough battle. But I think that Brian Dable, with his mind and how he's been able to utilize Daniel Jones, gives me a sigh of relief that I think that this game is going to be closer than that 7.5 spread. I think that the Giants actually will cover that 7.5 points. And one thing I'm looking at as well is the bet. I already talked about Devontae Smith. His over is at 63.5 yards. I do like that. He was ranked, he was 11th in the league in receptions, 9th in the yards this year, just quietly, the top 10 in yards, 63.5. That he's the number 2 receiver in this team only because of AJ Brown being there. I think that he's definitely going to get that 63.5 yards. I like that bet. I like the over there. It's going to be a tough game, but like I said, the turnover battle is what I think is going to come down to. New York is 7-2. If they can win that turnover battle against these Eagles, then they can come up with a win in this game.
Yeah, 7.5 is a big spread. Divisional game, third time you're playing this team. I think, there's a lot of room always in divisional matchups for things that are unquantifiable, right?
Mhm.
Like things that just happen. These teams know each other. So I think a couple of things for me. You're right. I think when we look at the matchups here, the defensive line of the Eagles has been generating a lot of pressure. Hassan Reddick and Josh Sweat. You talk about the tackles. One tackle has been absolutely phenomenal. Andrew Thomas, who's probably one of the best left tackles in the league now already. But the other tackle, the rookie Evan Neal, who was supposed to be right from Alabama, top 5 pick. He was going to be kind of making that tackles, the bookends for their line, basically staples for the next decade with Thomas already. But Evan Neal has struggled tremendously this year. So I think you're going to figure out they're going to figure out a way to utilize pressure from that side, which means the Giants are going to either have to have Bellinger on that side chipping, or
Yeah.
they're going to have Saquon blocking. But I think the key for the Giants to keep this game close, the Eagles play a similar style of defense to the Vikings. Now, the Vikings were just awful, like that their personnel did match that. The Eagles actually have studs on defense, right, who can actually play to that scheme. But what that means is there's going to be running lanes, in my opinion, for Daniel Jones. I think he's going to have to be equally as aggressive as he's been the last couple of games with his legs. Like you said, 17 carries against the Vikings. He
Mhm.
may not have as much success, but the minute he stops utilizing his legs, that's, one of the premier attributes that he has. It means that the Eagles defense doesn't have to account for it anymore. So I think now that he knows how much openness he's seen with his legs and how much that can just even help create the pass, he's going to use that. So I'm riding with that hot hand, with that trend. I think there's going to be more rushing opportunities for Daniel Jones, just because they don't have great outside weapons. The Vikings have nobody in terms of cornerbacks to stop these guys, but you have, James or Darius Slay and James Bradbury on their side,
Right.
right, for the
Huge difference.
Eagles. So you're not going to see Isaiah Hodgins running 10 yards free like he was against Minnesota. You're probably not going to see that for Slayton and Gang. So I think they're going to really have to get creative. Saquon's going to have to run the football effectively, which they can do against the Eagles defense, even though that defensive line is good. So I think, again, the difference for me here is Daniel Jones has revitalized himself protecting the football, but also using his legs. And that's two things that don't always go hand in hand. Players that quarterbacks that love to run the football, they run first, they tend to fumble the football a lot, stuff, right? Cause turnovers, create turnovers. We can change the game dramatically, but he's protecting the football and he's still running the football effectively. So I think Daniel Jones is going to have a decent day running the football for the Eagles to stay in this game, or for the Giants to stay in this game. But the Eagles defense, despite having all these big names, they give up points, they give up yards. So there's a way to attack them. And I think third time around, you hit the nail on the head. Brian Daboll doesn't get enough credit. What he did to Josh Allen as their offensive coordinator slash quarterback coach for basically Josh Allen. And now you're seeing Daniel Jones revitalized, right? So I think he deserves a lot of credit. I think he's going to get this team ready to play. And as long as Daniel Jones does what he doesn't do what he hasn't done all year, which is turn the football over, the Giants are going to keep this game close.
Right.
God, that's going to be good football. Take it to Sunday, where we have two premier matchups, starting with the matchup that we all have been longing to see. We got such a glimpse of it, but didn't get to see it as much as we would have wanted in the regular season. The Cincinnati Bengals are traveling to Buffalo to take on the Buffalo Bills. Bills at home, favored by 5.5 points. The Bengals getting no respect from Vegas. Over under sitting at 48. We already remember the first matchup. It was canceled because of the entire DeMar Hamlin situation. Thank God he is, back and doing better, and, officially headed in the right direction there. So both these teams, already have this emotional connection that they shared on this football field that, neither team could have expected to have coming into that football game. So that already makes for an interesting storyline there. But the football side of things is both teams are coming in extremely hot. Buffalo's won 7 in a row outside of that game that got canceled, so it doesn't really matter. Cincinnati has won 8 in a row, similar with that same game between the two teams that got canceled. So the line is very interesting to me. Vegas favoring Buffalo at home by 5.5 points. I just don't understand it, because Cincinnati has proven over the last, 10 to 13 games that it's not just their offense that's winning football games. Their defense has been stout. They're creating turnovers. They're making timely plays. And Buffalo has seemed a lot more suspect on their defensive side of the ball, and even just coming out victorious with games where, you have Josh Allen sometimes train wrecking a game by turning the football over too many times. You're not seeing Joe Burrow do that. You're not seeing the Bengals offense do that. So I don't quite understand this line. And, added motives, we talk about it. Joe Mixon came out and said he was so unhappy about, obviously, the whole, because of the game cancel situation, the Bengals got the shortest end of all of this shtick, right? In reality, this game should have been played at a neutral site. That's kind of what would make sense. But Buffalo is getting this home football game, and being one game ahead, we don't know how that game would have played out. So not only that, but because they're expecting Buffalo to win, this semifinal game, Buffalo against Kansas City, is going to be played at a neutral site. And so they're already selling tickets for that perennial matchup, which is probably going to be played in Atlanta, by the way. So they're already selling tickets for that. possible matchup, despite the fact that the Bengals could quite easily win this football game, and that would not be the
Right.
outcome. So that's already another added motive to Joe Mixon. They've already talked about it, and I don't think the Bengals are the type of team that need more motivation. They already have Joe Burrow, who basically kind of runs the ship here, and he's a guy that, again, I don't think he's got that instinct that he doesn't need additional motives. It's not like I need to create my own crazy scenario to get myself hyped up for this game. So I don't understand why there is so much disrespect going on the Cincinnati side. I just really, really don't understand it. And we talk about Buffalo, shove it, and Buffalo, when you point to teams that pass the football a ton and don't run the football a lot, they complement their pass with their run. We talk about Singletary and Cook and stuff. Buffalo is one of the top teams that comes to mind. Well, look at Cincinnati's percentage of pass plays they run this year. They actually run a higher percentage of pass plays than Buffalo does. Buffalo 65.2, Cincinnati 66. We think of Joe Mixon. He's got 5 touchdowns one game. He's constantly over 1,000 yards. He's constantly a decent top 10 fantasy running back. We think about this team as like, oh, they love to run the football, but that's not been the case this year at all. They've led in and they've fed into this Joe Burrow's our guy, so we're going to lean into him and let him be the show, let him run the show, kind of like Buffalo does, but they're doing it at even a higher clip. So again, this entire team right now is running through Joe Burrow and this offense, this passing game. You're going to have Tre'Davious White. You're going to have Jamar Chase. You're going to have T. Higgins on the side. Micah Hyde's not going to get to play, but Jordan Poyer's still going to be there in the backfield. And the linebackers for the Buffalo Bills have stepped up. Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmonds. Those guys have been playing phenomenally. So there are marquee matchups here to be had, but think about it like this. When push comes to shove, right now, the last 7 to 8 weeks, if you had to pick a quarterback between Allen and Burrow to win you a playoff football game, who would you pick?
Man, that is so tough. But I just love the receiving core that the Bengals have more than I like. Josh Allen. Yes, Stephon Diggs is good, but who's the number two? Like, is Gabe Davis really for real? He hasn't been. He hasn't been showing up. McKenzie's didn't play last week. He gets hurt.
I think he's hurt. Yeah.
Cole Beasley did come in, but Cole Beasley is like, he's an older guy. So I think that the threat that the Bengals offer on their offense, give me Joe Burrow and that offense more than Josh Allen and Diggs and Davis instead.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I didn't even think about it from like the entirety of the supporting cast. I'm just thinking about it from the standpoint of it's playoff football. Turnovers are literally the
True,
backbreaker, right?
true.
What kills you in the playoffs, again, you can get away maybe in the regular season with turning the football over a ton and having, playing winning football and coming away victorious. The Vikings didn't turn the football over, but they did that shit, a ton, winning close football games at the end. But in the playoffs, you have to protect the football. And right now, Josh Allen's trend over his last like 10, 15 games or 10 games or so, he's turning the football over. Despite bailing them out on offense, still, he's turning the football over. And we talked about it earlier, how Trevor Lawrence can't throw 4 interceptions against Patrick Mahomes because you can get away with that against, bad teams, average teams with average quarterbacks, but any team that has, one of the premier quarterbacks, you cannot get away with that. And so similar in this situation, you're not going to get away with that against Joe Burrow and this high flying offense. So again, despite the fact that it's being played in Buffalo, I understand that Buffalo has, this emotional edge, maybe if you want to give them that, sure. I still don't agree with that. So
Mhm.
this line at 5.5 seems tremendously high to me. So right now, again, in this tight matchup that, on paper probably is going to be decided by less than 3 points, give me Cincinnati as the dogs plus 5.5. A lot at stake here. And I just think they're not the type of team that's not going to show up to play this game. Even if they lose, it's going to be a tight contest till the end.
Yeah, I mean, just look at the last game with the Bills, right? Bills and Dolphins. Like, yes, Bills did come up with a win on that game, but it wasn't an easy game for them. Like
Third string
against
quarterback.
Right, Skylar Thompson, and if it was Joe Burrow on that team throwing it to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, like what would have happened to this Buffalo Bills? So I think it's just kind of it really is messed up. They really didn't plan this out correctly. The fact that this game is home, but then the next game is in a neutral site, it doesn't make
What?
any
It doesn't
sense.
make sense.
It doesn't make sense. And it's like the whole NFL is kind of riding on the Bills to get as far, like that Bills to Chiefs matchup, right? Josh
Yep.
Allen
Yeah.
versus
They're
Patrick.
selling the tickets already.
And that's kind of what the narrative and that what they're kind of going towards. But I think the Bengals are a smart player. I like the plus 5.5. I mean, this could be a game that it gets it's a field goal in overtime that wins the game or something like that, right? Or one team scores a field goal and then the other team scores a touchdown. That's 4 points. That can definitely happen in overtime, or just to give an example. So I think, yeah, plus 5.5. Give me that Bengals for sure. Win is going to be a little bit tough against Buffalo. They can still win the game. Their defense is still fairly like it's not bad, right? Like
Mhm.
they've got enough players there, but yeah, 5.5, it's too high for me.
Agreed.
Yeah, that's going to be a fun matchup. But the matchup that I am looking most forward to is the Dallas Cowboys traveling to San Francisco to face the 49ers. 49ers are favored by 4 points. Over under in that game is 46 points. And this is their first matchup of this year, but a rematch of last year. I don't know if you remember, but last year the Dallas Cowboys lost because of the sun. The sun was in their eyes; they couldn't see. And now they're not playing in Dallas; they're playing in San Francisco. So this actually may work out for them. But it's Kyle Shanahan versus his former boss Dan Quinn when they were both in the Atlanta Falcons. So that's going to be a fun matchup of this offensive, just guru versus Dan Quinn, who's leading this defense into a really efficient play. So it's going to be an interesting matchup because this is I think the best defense, arguably, that San Francisco is facing against this year, or if not this year, then definitely Brock Purdy, right? I don't think
Mhm.
Brock Purdy has had a game against more a consistent and efficient team as the Dallas Cowboys. So that's going to be fun to see. Like, I'm just looking for when Brock Purdy is going to fall down. Like, it's not that I'm not rooting for him. I am rooting for him, but again, he's a rookie. So how long can this continue? That's going to be interesting thing to see. The matchups are very intriguing as well. Tyler Smith, their offensive lineman, versus Nick Bosa, who was out there just getting sacks, getting pressures, is one of the leading reasons why this San Francisco defense is really good. I'm interested to see what Dan Quinn has lined up for the weapons that the 49ers have. How are they going to stop CMC? How are they going to stop Debo? Is Debo and Diggs? Is
Are
Diggs?
they even stoppable?
I'm not sure. I'm sure Diggs will line up with Debo as much as he can when he's not playing the X. But if he's in the running back position, right? Like how
It's
is
gonna be yeah, it's mostly gonna have to be Ayuk, right? Like you
right,
said, Debo barely even lines up out there anymore a ton. He's in the slot, he's in the backfield, he's running around, right?
right?
So Trayvon Diggs is gonna have to he's got to try to take away something, right? And the guy that has the most likely chance of possibly being taken away maybe is Brandon Ayuk
Mm-hmm.
because he doesn't get utilized millions of different ways. He kind of has his role and he runs it well. So that's one guy that they can try to take away. But if they do try to do that, Shovit, that's where the sneaky guy who just doesn't really care about getting all the touches, but then when it's his time to shine, he's like a god. George Kittle will just step up out of nowhere and have 100
True.
yards.
True. This is where I feel like I'm so interested to see in what Dan Quinn has played out because this Cowboys defense is all about doing weird things with Micah Parsons, right? Is he
Mhm.
gonna go for the sack? Is he gonna drop back? How is he? How are they gonna utilize him and this whole offense? That's gonna be the X factor here if he can to beat this Kyle Shanahan a team. But San Francisco defense is really good as well. So defensively, they've held opposing offenses to 16.3 points a game. So that's number one in the league. This defense is for real. And we saw what Dak did to Tampa Bay Buccaneers last game. Kudos to Dak, kudos to the Cowboys, but they're not a consistent team. They show up and then they don't show up, and their defense is what kind of has been getting them turnovers and points. So will Dak Prescott show up? Will Tony Pollard and Zeke make a breakthrough against the second ranked NFL rush defense? That's going to be something to see. I think that they're not going to go away from the run game. They're going to try to run the ball, and I think that um, they're going to have to find ways to get Pollard and Elliott involved. And I think one of the ways they can do that is utilizing Dak for what they've been doing in the last 4 games, which is running the ball. Dak,
Yep.
16 yards, 11 yards, 41 yards, 20, and then 23 in the last 5 games. So his rushing prop is at 15 and a half. So four out of those 5 times his rushing prop has hit. So I like the over for Dak Prescott in this game. Yes, they're playing against a tough defense, but we took Geno Smith last week for rushing yards, right? And
Mhm.
he had 28 yards last game. And then I forget the name of the Raiders quarterback, Garrett Stidham.
Jared
Jarrett
Stidham.
Stidham, 34 yards that game against the Raiders. Who's not really a rushing quarterback. So I like the 15 and a half yards for Dak Prescott, the bet for this game. But yeah, it's going to be a fun game. Like what are these two offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators going to plan out with all that weapon that Kyle Shanahan has on offense, and what the Dallas defense has been doing all season long? That's going to be a great clash, and I'm looking forward to it. I don't even know which way to pick, to be honest with you. I could see the Cowboys coming with the win in this game, and I can see the 49ers as well. So anyone that tells you they're for sure one way or the other, I don't buy that one bit. And 49ers are favored by 4 points, but it's going to be tough to say one way or the other for me. So I'll just sit back and watch this game.
It's two storied franchises, right? Two franchises that, have won a tremendous amount of championships. You can look back at their history and, they're probably top 5 franchises in the NFL. So it's marquee fan base, marquee franchise against marquee fan base, marquee franchise. And so there are a lot of, storylines and things at play. But one of the things you talked about, when the defense of the San Francisco 49ers, how good they've been, they've been so good that they have insanely dominant players on all 3 levels, right? You have Nick Bosa, who could be defensive player of the year. You already know the impact he has. They have 2 linebackers, Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner. Fred Warner is one of the best middle linebackers in the NFL. Dre Greenlaw is one of the best linebackers in the NFL. You have Travarius Ward on the outside, who's a premier cornerback, and then you have Troy Polamalu 2.0 and Hufanga as their safety, right? So they just have very few holes in the defense. So when you're the Cowboys offense, Kellen Moore, right? This guy he's also been getting possible head coaching interviews and looks. He's supposed to be an offensive mastermind. How is he going to scheme up this offense to be able to attack a defense that, doesn't really have a lot of holes in, you can pinpoint where you want to attack them. And I think the key is something that, they won the game amazingly last week and stuff. But the one thing that, is not working for them that I think is going to be important this game is Zeke. Zeke's going to have to run the football effectively if they're going to want a chance. They're going to have to control the clock. They're going to have to grind out drives, right? There's probably going to be like 4th and 2s and stuff that, in close proximity, they're going to probably have to go for. And those are going to be the things that are going to extend the drive by an extra 2 minutes or 3 minutes. That's going to keep the 49ers off the field, keep less possessions in the hands of the 49ers so that, you're not allowing CMC and Debo to beat you in all these crazy ways. You're not allowing Kyle Shanahan to utilize, all of his bag of tricks. So the Cowboys are going to have to play a really, really sound football game if they want to win. And obviously on the defensive side, we already know, Micah Parsons, but we've talked about the way that the Cowboys go from looking like juggernaut potential Super Bowl winners to holy crap, like this team is in the playoffs, is if an offensive line can protect the pass rush when they're not bringing the blitz, all of a sudden the rest of this Cowboys defense kind of crumbles with it. So the offensive lineman for the San Francisco 49ers, obviously you have the best tackle in the world in Trent Williams, right? So they're going to have to try to get creative to get Micah Parsons free already, right? Just because of one guy who's going to be a roadblock there. Now, pair that with the fact that Kittle is one of the best blocking tight ends and they're going to use him wherever they need to. If they need a double Micah, they may, but you could have Kittle possibly help out against DeMarcus Lawrence on the other side. And all that does automatically is it means that Dan Quinn, you talk about it, the X factor, he's going to have to figure out a way outside of just normal pass rushes to get his playmakers, the best players on his defense, to actually make an impact. Because the game against the Commanders, Shovit, Micah Parsons is insane. He's otherworldly. But the game against the Commanders, he disappeared. Like you didn't hear his name for like 3.5 quarters. And he's not the kind of player that can go missing like that. And we saw the minute a player like that on that defense went missing, they just had a really tough time doing anything else. So that's going to be the key there. They have an uphill battle. I think San Francisco is just so complete that it's a situation where the Cowboys are going to, again, have to play perfect football because there's just so many ways San Francisco can beat you. And if for some reason this ends up being the game that Brock Purdy falters and he has, a subpar game, their defense is still so good and good enough that they can carry Purdy. And so, do I trust Dak Prescott, or what kind of Dak Prescott am I going to get? Am I going to get the 10 for 27 against the Commanders, or am I going to get the guy that had the best game of his career last game? I don't know. The too many ifs, ands, and buts and what ifs for the Cowboys. And I feel like the 49ers stability is just too pure, too real. Like there, it's just, you can't really point to weaknesses on this team. And that's a scary, scary football team. But I am such a proponent of quarterback. And like you said, they have a rookie quarterback. He's yet to falter. All it takes is one game. And if it's the playoffs and you have one mistake, is it a snowball effect where, you kind of crumble and that can turn the game upside down. So there are a lot of variables here, but to me, the Cowboys still face the toughest of uphill battles.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, 49ers, after, in the NFC, there's Eagles and there's 49ers, and then there's everyone else that is kind of like, trying to sort of solidify their, like, they're the best in the NFC, kind of that role. But I think that, yeah, it's just all going to come down to how their defensive coordinator handles this. The fact that Dan Quinn and Kyle Shanahan are so close to one another, they worked with each other. There's got to be something there that the Cowboys can utilize and kind of work off of. But you're right, it is going to be an uphill battle. So that's what makes it exciting. That's why it's fun. It's going to be a fun game to watch.
Yeah, I mean, the Cowboys winning this football game would be insane. It'd be huge for the franchise, the fans. We're never going to hear the end of it. It's annoying, obviously, for us, but at the same time, like, winning this game and making it to the semifinals would be like a path where it's like, holy shit, they actually deserved that, right? I mean, you beat Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay was whatever, but you didn't just beat Tampa Bay. You kind of throttled Tampa Bay. That's why I was like, okay, I'm still impressed with that, despite the fact that Tampa Bay wasn't great. But
Mhm.
if you somehow go to San Francisco and you beat this 49ers football team, I mean, all of a sudden, look out, man. The Cowboys could, be headed or potentially win the Super Bowl.
Right.
4 games and God, 4 of the just most amazing matchups. I don't know. There are very few teams that aren't in this lineup that I'm like, man, I wish they were there. Like these matchups are just scripted for NFL fans, man. I'm so excited for this weekend of football. Now that fantasy's over, though, we need a little bit more juice on these games than just watching it as a fan, which means we're going to bring back the best bets. We're bringing back the best bets. I picked up some lines from Prize Picks. I've been using Prize Picks a lot. I know I talked about it a little bit here. Daily fantasy, you pick an over under on the player stat line or prop that they give you. So I have a couple of Prize Pick bet lines that I really like that I'm probably going to play this week. First and foremost, and I have one per game. So the first game, the Jags Chiefs, I have Patrick Mahomes over 24 fantasy points. He was the number one fantasy quarterback this year. This is the playoffs. This is where it matters. The Jags surrendered 27 points to the Chargers last week in a more subpar offense with Justin Herbert. There is no reason that an offense that is entirely dependent on the best player in football, he should not get under 24 fantasy points. If that happens, that means the Chiefs probably lost this football game, and very few people are expecting that. So give me Patrick Mahomes over 24 fantasy points.
I
You
like it.
talked about you talked about this in the Eagles Giants matchup. Show of it. Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones has been running the football a lot more. He's getting more carries, more opportunities, means there's more chances that he's going to hit his rushing prop. It is still only sitting at 45.5. I like the over at 45.5. We already know the game against the Vikings, but he runs the football a lot. The Eagles are susceptible to allowing running football. And I think the only way this offense is going to be successful and have a chance, again, because of the lack of playmakers, is the playmakers have to be Saquon and Dimes. And that means Danny Dimes is going to have to use his legs. So I love the rushing prop at 45.5 there. The game on Sunday, the Bengals and Buffalo Bills, it's a pretty easy situation for me here as well. Josh Allen over 23.5 fantasy points. He is the number 2 fantasy quarterback in the NFL behind Patrick Mahomes. Josh Allen uses his legs. Not only does Josh Allen use his legs, he loves rushing for touchdowns. And again, it's fantasy football. It's a prime matchup. I don't even have to explain to you the magnitude of this game. We've already talked about it in plethora or in whatever. So give me the over 23.5 fantasy points for Josh Allen.
Real quick, so these fantasy points are based off of
Half
touchdown,
point PPR.
half point
Half point
PPR,
PPR
4 point.
standard. Yeah. So 4
Yeah,
point touchdown passes. Yep. Exactly.
cool, cool.
And then the last game, I am riding with Big Cock Brock until he tells us otherwise. All this guy does is throw for at least 2 touchdown passes. He's done it in every game he's played. His over under is set at 1.5. Again, if Dallas's defensive line is held, which Trent Williams against Micah Parsons, it can happen. I think their defense is susceptible. There's too many weapons. Brock Purdy has to do little with a lot, with just dumping the ball off to Debo for 70 yards or dumping the ball off to CMC for 80 yards. So I like his passing touchdowns at over 1.5. It hasn't not hit yet. So until it chooses not to hit, I'm stupid to not keep taking this. So give that to me as well. Those are my 4 prize pick bets per game that I'm going to lock in, probably play those individually, and I might throw them all in one 4-teamer too. So have a little fun with it, you know?
Yeah, that's gonna be fun. Keep fantasy alive even when the fantasy season's over.
Yeah. And then the last thing is there's 4 games. I love doing monster teasers. I know it's not the greatest of odds. I think it's like minus 130, but you get to buy 13 points. And in the NFL, 13 points is, exponential. So all I did was I took all of the underdogs and I bought 13 points from each of them. Jags plus 22, Giants plus 20.5, Bengals plus 18.5, and the Cowboys plus 17. There could very well be blowouts. There could very well be multiple blowouts, but based on everything that we've talked about, based on all the time spent watching these teams and these games, the matchups you know, are closer to me on paper than what some of these lines dictate. Plus, I'm getting 13 points on top of that. It's just going to mean if this doesn't hit, then one of these teams is just getting their ass handed to them. So I don't expect that to happen just because, again, the matchups remain close in my opinion. So give me this 13-point teaser just for a little fun. I'm going to throw a couple units on that.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm looking at this. You've got, Jags at 22, Giants at 20 and a half, Bengals at 18 and a half, Cowboys at 17. Man, that's good. That's a big line. But I mean, hey, mathematically, I think that if you took those bets individually, you'd be really happy with those bets. So combine
Yeah.
those all into one, get a nice teaser combo.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. That is all I have, Shovit. Do you have any final words before we officially sign off and head into our divisional round weekend?
No, I hope you guys make all the money that you want and place the right bets, and good luck.
Absolutely. Best of luck to you guys. Win all the monies. Hope your favorite football team wins. Hope we get a ton for really good football games. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode. I am Sweetcard. That is Shovit. We missed your show. Hope he's doing well at the hospital, doing doctor things. Thank you guys so much again for tuning in. Have a fantastic